Hello, America, and welcome to Of the People. My name is Robert Chernin with the American Center for Education and Knowledge. Thank you so much for joining us for yet another podcast. At ACEK, we will always defend American exceptionalism. And part of that, the core of that, are the individual freedoms and liberties that we enjoy as Americans and the code of personal responsibility that underpin it. Those are the very core of who and what we are. We also reject a divided America. But the problem is that America is probably more divided now than it has ever been at any time since our Civil War. So are we really now the divided states of America? With regards to the presidential election, there are dueling slates of electors that have been nominated or selected for when the Electoral College votes are counted in January. The Supreme Court, supposedly the last great American institution standing, has, in my opinion, gone out of its way to not hear any case at all, obviously throwing out the Texas lawsuit for lack of standing, which you have to sort of scratch your head at. There's certainly now confirmation that there is cyber warfare, at the very least, and perhaps open warfare between China and the United States. And more there is talk about a civil war or martial law in the country. And the last time that was done was really wasn't done, but the last time the Constitution was suspended was during the last Civil War under Lincoln. So the real question is, are we still a republic or are we something else? And if we are, what is that? Because the country was founded on ideals and principles that we have in common that we agreed to. So if we don't agree to those things, then what are we? To help us make sense of it all, we turn again to Jay Shepard, Vice Chair of the RNC, and Dr. Bruce Abramson. Gentlemen, welcome to Of the People.
Thank you, Robert. Great to be here again.
It's great to be here as well. Lots
going on, guys. Let's jump right to it. So part of what I want to talk about is the election update. Supreme Court, dueling slate of electors. I really want to understand the dueling slate of electors. So it's not really allowed for in the Constitution, but it has been done twice. I think once during the 1960s race where there was a competing slate of electors, and once, if I remember, during that was probably 1870 something Rutherford B. Hayes election. How does that work? There are 7 states that have dueling electors that are going to show up on January 6th, I believe, when Congress counts the votes. Dr. Bruce, you're the knower of all things. Help me understand, how does this procedure play itself out come January?
Well, as you said, we're in unprecedented territory. But what it really comes down to, what all of this comes down to, is that we've had a total failure of our institutions. No institution has been willing to actually open up the allegations, the claims, the concerns, and look at them and address them. What the dueling slate of electors do is they show up in front of Congress, and now Congress has to accept their vote, right? I mean, Mike Pence nominally is the vote counter in the Senate, but Congress has to accept their votes. And my understanding is that if any member of Congress wants to contest them, they have to go back and debate and discuss. So this is an attempt to preserve the claim, to get to the point that maybe Congress will be the one institution in American life that's actually willing to address the deep concerns many of us have with this election.
And Jay, turning to you on this, it's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong because you're closer to this than I am, the way this would work is the president of the Senate is the vice president, Mike Pence. He would open the envelopes, count the votes, and there has to be a challenge both from a congressman and a senator. Is that correct? And then it would go to both chambers?
That's not my understanding. And one of the things that I've known about the dueling delegate count, the electoral vote, is that they always start with the certified documents from the states that have sent the electoral thing. There has to be a severe objection that there's something out of line with what they're receiving from the states. So in order for this to go forward, which I doubt any of it will, they would have to have some objection, a serious objection. And I don't believe there's anybody in the Senate, House, or anywhere else in Washington that's going to step up and say, we are not going to elect Joe Biden as our next president.
And that would bring us to the Supreme Court, who has, in my opinion, has shirked its responsibility as, I think, as Dr. Bruce, you would say, the last great American institution standing. But it seems to me that they are, what's the word, assiduously trying to avoid getting involved in the election dispute at all. So does any of this go before the Supreme Court? There are still, by my count, 4 or 5 cases, 2 or 3 already on the docket for the Supreme Court to determine whether or not they're going to grant cert.
I think the Supreme Court has signaled pretty clearly that it will not weigh in here. The Texas case was punted on standing. Standing doctrine is sort of this weird issue, but you basically, the argument is you have to show that you've been damaged by something in order to claim a lawsuit against it. Now, standing has opened up greatly over the past 40 or 50 years, particularly in environmental cases, right? I can now file a lawsuit because I can file a lawsuit because I think that my state isn't taking global warming seriously. How does that damage me? Well, if the sea levels rise and Manhattan is underwater, that's, and I live in Manhattan, that affects me. Right. So the notion that the Supreme Court came forward and said that the citizens of Texas could not have suffered cognizable damage because other states attempted to violate the Constitution and put in place an illegitimate president, it seems to me to be a little bit tenuous. Okay, they could have gone that way.
The question there has always been that if it was technically flawed, and that they couldn't have it that way. The president could have had standing in that case, and he could have presented the same documents in the same petition to the Supreme Court, but they didn't. So I think there's a lot more to the depth behind all of that than just saying that Texas didn't have standing. I think there are plenty of people who did have standing, and they could have presented the same lawsuit, but they did not. So we also have to look at the strength of the merits of the case beyond being thrown out for a technical reason.
Well, and that would, and it would be, I think that it's critical that the Supreme Court weigh in on the merits of this case. For the simple reason, this is something I've written about several times. Right? We've got conflicting narratives out there. There is a sizable chunk of Americans who believe firmly and fundamentally that we held a free and fair election with record turnout that gave Joe Biden a fairly clear margin of victory. There is also a very large block of Americans, to which I belong, that believes that we held a sham election that was rigged to produce a specific outcome that included legal but unethical measures, as well as illegal measures and outright fraud. And that if Joe Biden is installed as president, the republic will have fallen because we will have ratified procedures that make it impossible to have a credible election.
All right. So hold that thought. Hold that thought. So that's an interesting segue, because as I said in the opening to this podcast, that unlike any other country in the history of the world that we know of, it's not a common ethnic group that founded America. It's not a common nationality that founded America. It's founded on a common set of ideals and principles that everybody agreed to, right? So there's an article I want to throw into this debate because I think it's a fascinating article, because are we living in a republic or are we now something else? If in fact there was fraud, and if so, to what extent? So in it's called A Common Sense Solution in American Mind. It's by Professor Tom Trenchard, who I don't know, and I hope I pronounced his name accurately. But he says the following. He says, we are two Americas, Biden's America and Trump's America. And these two Americas have nothing of importance in common with each other and no common ground to stand on. There is not a single moral or political principle upon which these two Americas agree. Sure, everybody wants freedom, justice, equality, and democracy, and a host of other glittering ideals, right? So have most dictators, communists, and war criminals in modern history, including Lenin, Stalin, and Mao, gave stirring speeches to all of them. Here's the key. The reality is that in the United States, we have long since ceased doing anything more than pay lip service to the shared facsimile of old shared ideals. And if we are not held together as a nation by anything except the fact that we live together in a common place, then what are we? And I paraphrased a little bit in there. So, Jay, are we still a republic? Where do we, I don't even want to get into, was there fraud or was there not? I think hopefully that the process will go forward and people will pursue this to its logical end in terms of finding out the facts. But I think Bruce's point is on mark, right? There is 50 to 60 million people that no matter what happens are going to claim, I would argue, with justification, that this election was illegitimate and this result was illegitimate. So are we a republic or are we something else?
Well, I think we're still a republic, and I still think there's great hope for this country and that we are not two countries within one. A lot of it for me is defining issues that we agree on in principle, but we don't understand how it affects each and every one of us individually. And there were somewhere in the neighborhood of 150 million people that voted in this last election. And I risk to say that there's 50 to 60 million conservatives in this country that were voting on the issues and understanding. There are probably 40 million on the Democrat side. And there was a large group of 50 to 60 million Americans that just don't pay attention and don't understand the ramifications of their votes. So we need to do a much better job in informing the general public about what's important and what isn't. Simple things like every day you hear about we need to have affordable housing. Well, what is that? Is that so that somebody can have subsidized rent income where the landlord has to raise the rates and be subsidized? Or is it someone like you and I that are out there saying affordable housing, if my taxes are outrageous on my property, my housing isn't affordable either. So we need to start defining things and what the ramifications are for each and every one of us across the board. I think we have a whole lot more in common, but we have a real difficult time defining the ramifications and educating the drive-by voter that doesn't realize things are more than just a slogan.
Bruce, was it a free and fair election, and are we still a republic?
So I take it you want me to start on the half of what Jay said that I disagree with, rather than the half that I agree with. No, we have not been living in a republic since March. Okay, the republic fell when we had an emergency declaration that gave governors and to some extent mayors and county executives and even HOA boards pretty much unfettered authority determine which activities were essential and which were non-essential, to apply different rules to these different categories, and to do pretty much anything they wanted to do in the name of public health. Now, it turns out that one of the real reasons that it was critical for the Supreme Court to take the Texas case that they brought forward is that what the Texas suit focused on was the procedural irregularities. That is, executives in various states, governors, secretaries of state, county executives, who took a look at their own state's election laws and said, well, those things are inconvenient because of COVID. And therefore, in a public health emergency, I can just do things differently, even though it doesn't really comply with my state's election laws. And that is the heart of the republic, where we've been living for the past 9 months, is a country in which the government can do whatever it wants. It can withdraw your freedoms. It can withdraw your rights. It can put restrictions on your activity. It can fine you, as long as it does so in the name of public health. That is not a republic. So
in the best interest, right, for the good of all, right, for the good of the body, for the good of the people, right? Is that the rationale?
Well, it's absolutely the rationale. It is absolutely. It's been the rationale on everything.
Jay, jump in here.
Yeah, let me ask you this then, Bruce.
Yeah.
And I don't want to insult your legal background at all.
Yeah.
But what do we have here? Do we have a set of incompetent lawyers, or do we have a set of incompetent jurists?
No,
Is it the judiciary that's the problem, or is it the lawyers that are bringing these cases that they can't win?
we have a now complete set of failed institutions. Okay. There is not a single elite American institution that could point with pride to its performance in the 21st century. Not one. We have a complete set of failed institutions in this country, public sector and private sector, that is much more interested, that has been won over by a very popular, I mean, longstanding, this is an attitude that predates the Republic, much older than the United States, that says enlightened elite opinion knows what's best for everybody. And, we're relatively benign, so we'll take input from the people periodically, but we know what's right for everyone.
Well, you're absolutely right. And the problem is that we're all buying into that, and we've become the sheep mentality. So I also get a little bit confused, though, when we got this intellectual elite that's out there versus the Kardashians that have the same number of followers as the intellectual elites. So we've got a bunch of people saying,
Right.
if Kim and Kanye think we should, wear face masks, then we do. And the intellectual Ivy League scholars and those with a bunch of letters after their name say we should wear masks, then we do. Where's the rest of us? Those of us in the middle that, went to a college that we could get into, that are trying to earn a living every single day, and we don't have the pedigree of the intellectual elite, and we don't have the good looks of the Kardashians. So I'm struggling out here. How do I make an influence?
Wait a minute. I object to that we don't have the good looks part of this. Okay. I mean, I've got to have some takeaway here. Let me throw in another variable here. Okay. So there's also, so it's clear to me, or it seems to me, that I don't know what we live in, but it's certainly not a republic where the power flows from the people upward. Call it an aristocracy, call it something else. Doesn't make it bad. It just makes it different. So you can't claim that you're living in a democracy, or in this case, a republic, when your vote doesn't really matter, right? You're going to argue, Jay, that it does. I would tend to side with Bruce on this. But there's also now been this revelation, which I think is a little late in coming, about the interference of China and other foreign entities, right? I don't know if he's a secretary, but Radcliffe, who's John Radcliffe, who's the head of DNI, right? Has basically confirmed, because 17 agencies, right? I mean, we're going to pull the Obama or Biden line. Well, 17 agencies have confirmed, right, that there was foreign interference in this election. Russia, Iran, and China, to name them. Obviously, China is all over the media in terms of what's, their interference here. Do they own dominion? Don't they own dominion? But clearly there's cyber warfare. We're at war with China, right? So if you're at war with China, here's the curveball. If we're really at war, when we're at wartime, it may not be a shooting war or a hot war, but how do you change leadership in the middle of a war? We lost Jay, so that means it's you, Bruce.
Well, I gotta wait for Jay to come back, because you stepped on my line. He gave a promo for my forthcoming book. Jay, there you are. I was going to back up and thank you, because what you outlined in talking about the elite and the folks with credentials is a pitch for my forthcoming book. I held back on it because I wanted to make sure that it made sense.
All right, wait. Let's pitch it. What's the name of the book?
Name of the book is The New Civil War.
When's it out?
Sometime early 21, maybe March.
So Jay and I want the first 2 autographed copies.
Okay, you got it. And
let's go back to the question.
The working subtitle is exposing the elite, fighting progressivism, and restoring America, because I fundamentally believe the Republic has fallen and we need a restorationist movement. Now, your question, which was,
you asking me? I got to repeat this?
Yeah, just give me the segue back into it.
So the segue really is, we're clearly at war.
Right.
How do you change leadership in wartime? Now, it's not a hot war. It's not, there are not aircraft carriers going over to, Italy and Sicily and, fighting Nazi Germany. But to me, we're very clearly at war with China for sure, with Iran for sure. But the real war is China. I think that's been established. So
Countries change leaders in the middle of war all the time. I
really,
mean, yeah, they do it because they don't like the approach that's being taken. I mean, Neville Chamberlain gave way to Winston Churchill, right? The Maginot Line fell. The French Assembly Generale got together and decided to put Pétain in charge with the specific instruction of sue Hitler for the best terms you can get. The Tsar fell in the middle of World War I, in part because Lenin said, "I'm going to sue Germany for peace." And we changed leaders who knows how many times throughout the Cold War. I mean, we had, there were 7 or 8 Cold War presidents. I mean, countries change leaders during wartime all the time. Of all the arguments in favor of keeping Trump in the White House, I think that's the wrong one. You keep your leadership if you think they're doing a good job. If any voter who thinks that Trump is doing a bad job dealing with China should be more than justified in saying, I'm voting against him because I think he's doing a bad job with China. And that's why I'd like to change leaders, to get somebody who'll take a different approach. I mean, that to me is not, it's not historically grounded, and it's not rational.
Okay. So let's segue. Let's segue from here.
Can I comment on that for just a minute, Robert?
Of course you can. That's why you're here.
One of the things that is a little bit different is that we've been at war with China for decades. But President Trump is the only one that actually knew it and would acknowledge it and engage in that war. China's been doing all the smart things that we aren't even noticing. They're running people for student council president in high schools. They're running people on city councils and school boards all over this country, not just running people, but supporting them and doing other things. They're fighting for the whole Global Warming Solutions Act that's out there. So what they're trying to do is destroy our democracy from the ground up. And we need to be aware of it, that when we build simple things like bike paths, so that we don't need energy any longer, that the fossil fuel energy that we've become the dominant player in the world is no longer important to our economy. And they're screwing with our economy. And if we don't realize that they're into us so deep and so pervasive, because this is a war for them. And if we don't act in kind, if we don't make a difference, and we know for sure that the Biden-Harris thing is going to be Neville Chamberlain throughout all of this, and say, take whatever you want, just don't take our pensions as government leaders, and you're fine. Keep sending my kid money. So we need to stay engaged in this war, and Trump was the only one that was doing it. And hopefully we can survive until we have some other wartime general that comes into the Oval Office and makes a difference.
Oh, I agree with that entirely, but that's an argument that says we should not jettison Trump's leadership because he's doing a good job. It's not an argument that says we've got a leader and we're in the middle of a war, therefore we should stick with him.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
How about General Kelly for president? Just kidding. So since we segued say again?
I think General Turner might be a good choice as well.
Yeah, you don't see any stars over here, right? No, there's no stars. Bald head I got. So that brings us to the last piece. So let's talk about, so what does a Biden president look? 99% certain, short of an earthquake, that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are going to be the next president and vice president of the United States. It pains me to say that, but it is what it is.
Yep.
So what does a Biden presidency look like, and what can America expect? Jay, we're going to start with you on that one.
I think the roadmap is there. As you take the Obama administration, you put on steroids. You're bringing a bunch of people in that were part of that movement, part of that group, and they've learned a lot from it. They've got more fodder. They've learned. They're going to make quick executive action is going to take place almost immediately. They're going to try to overturn everything that the president has done that's made a difference in this country, from protecting religious liberties, religious freedoms, to our Second Amendment rights. They will go to the foundation of everything that's made this country great, and they'll try to tear it down limb by limb, piece by piece, and they will be relentless.
Dr. Bruce, what say you?
I agree. I think that there are going to be several priority areas that you see. One is there'll be a bunch of stuff done to energize their base, whatever they can ram through the radical base wants, just to make those people happy. Two is there will be a concerted effort to undo everything that has Trump's fingerprints on it, simply because it has Trump's fingerprints on it. There's no further analysis involved. Third, and this I think is their top priority, is they're going to continue the weaponization of the bureaucracy, and they're going to put forward as many rule changes and structural changes as possible to ensure that that we never again have a free and fair election. Beyond that, I think that there will be a tremendous amount of vindictiveness and suppression at all levels, because this is what's necessary to consolidate power. They need to shut down all the voices speaking against them. This is fairly standard after a coup or a color revolution. You can't let the opposition sit around and claim legitimacy of any sort, including moral legitimacy. And of course, I mean, if you look at the people they're bringing in, there will be a tremendous amount of corruption, favoring the interests of China and Iran, certainly, and secondarily, anybody else who wants to pony up.
Okay, so then here's the final question, guys. So then why stay in the marriage, right? If you're married to somebody for all these years, and you no longer are in love with each other, if you no longer share the same values, if you no longer believe the same things, want the same things, have the same foundational principles, why stay in the marriage? In other words, are we really the divided states of America, and where do we go from here? I'm not sure what secession would look like, but there is more and more conversation going on the internet and the social media. I think you're going to see with the 50 or 60 million people who don't buy into the legitimacy of this election, they're going to say, what do we have in common? And if we don't believe the same things, why stay in this marriage? Now, how do you get out of it's a different issue. And you bring up the concept of martial law and military intervention and another civil war for real. But so why stay in this marriage then? Why not become something like the European Union, where you have different nation states or different, I think this article that I just read before called the United Counties of America, as opposed to the United States of America. Why not that?
Well, I'll give you a simple reason for me, and that it's, if you're comparing it to a marriage should be based on love, desire, and a fundamental belief that you care considerably about your spouse. That never leaves. If there's truly love there, if you truly love your country, if you truly believe in your country and the values it was founded on, then you don't leave ever. Now, you may not like your spouse, you may not like this country and the direction it's going in, but if you have that underlying belief in that faith and love until death do us part, then you commit to it. So I think we all have to pull ourselves together and say, look, what we love more about this country is more important than the hate that we have. And we've seen it, that the Democrats so much hated Trump more than they loved America. And if we as conservatives and we as believers in American exceptionalism get away from that and stop espousing our love for this country and its fundamentals, we are completely lost one way or the other. And if we separate from that, we'll never have the values it takes to be the United Counties of America. So if we don't continue to fight for what's right and convince people one at a time and make them educated as to why America is exceptional and why we are the greatest, best hope left on earth, then we have no right to say we're going to run away from this. Until death do us part, we need to be committed to this country.
Good answer. Bruce, you get the close.
Yeah.
Leave us on a positive note.
Positive note. Okay. I mean, I'm a guy who's been writing for years that we need an American restoration. And now I'm a guy who's writing that the Republic is about to fall and we need to restore it. Make no mistake. I believe, because I have yet to see a single American institution that's willing to stand up to do what's right. That leads me to believe that Joe Biden will be the next president of the United States. But I do not believe that he will be the 46th president of the American Republic. I believe that he will be the first president of an American aristocratic oligarchy. Okay? The republic will have fallen, and we can restore it. Now, exactly what that restoration looks like, I don't know. I think that secession and disentanglement is harder than anybody would like to believe. I think that when the Soviet Union dissolved into its constituent republics, it was not clean and it was not neat. There are international issues, there is debt burden, there is disentangling the people. We can talk about counties, but you've got places like Ocean, as you know, Robert, as an old New Jersey guy, Ocean and Monmouth counties are in the middle of New Jersey. Those are your central New Jersey counties, and they fit very well into red America. But in any secessionist, but in any subdivision, those counties are central New Jersey is not going anywhere. This entanglement is tremendously difficult. Now, do I hope that we can restore the country with minimal bloodshed, with minimal structural damage to the country, without secession? Absolutely. But I don't know how long this oligarchy will last.
Did you just say minimal bloodshed? So we're now going to have bloodshed?
We've already had bloodshed. Right? We've had rioting. Look, urban street riots have been an intermittent part of the American terrain since 2013. We've already had bloodshed.
So next we're going to have the Jacobins and the guillotine, right? La guillotine. I'm not making light of this, Bruce. It's just I don't know where we go from here, right?
People have a very narrow view of history. Okay, they think that whatever they grew up with is the way that things will always be, but nothing is the way that things will always be. Everything changes. History repeats itself. In fact, part of the problem with progressivism is that, and I'm talking about not the hardcore ideological hard left folks that I talk to who generally vote Democrat and don't think of themselves as radicals and don't want to be manning the barricades. They've got this idea that the United States is such a strong, rich country that pretty much no matter what set of policies we'll pursue, will remain a strong, rich country. And the people here will be living peacefully and comfortably. So what the hell? Why not distribute income? Right?
As long as it's not yours?
Well, no. I mean, the basic...
No, as long as it's not mine.
No, the basic argument is we'll always have what we need. We'll always have what we want. We'll always be the richest people out there. So why not be generous with it? We don't need to defend ourselves because, hell, we're the United States. We've got the strongest army. Why waste your time going to war? I mean, this is the mentality that goes behind it. And the truth is, if you start out presuming that no matter what you do, there'll be enough money for you to have everything you want. Why the hell not pay for everybody's college? I mean, how does that hurt you? Right? If you believe that we will maintain the ability to dominate global affairs, even if we don't have a military, why invest in a military? Right? And that is...
By the way, my prediction is by the end of the Biden era presidency, the US dollar will no longer be the global currency. How do you like that for a prediction?
That's certainly possible.
So let me hold that thought. Jay, I'm going to give you the last word.
Let's not give up, folks. Let's not give up, folks. In 2 years, we've got a chance to change things around, win the House, win the supermajority in the Senate. There's plenty of hope out there. And if we don't stop fighting for what we believe in, we're fools. And, there's a lot of talent in this country. We need to activate it. We need to go neighbor to neighbor, door to door, and restore. I don't want to steal any of Bruce's books names, but we really need to restore what made America great to begin with. And I don't think
stealing them, you make them go viral.
Exactly. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us again on Of the People. Appreciate you being here. Good conversation.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
So another great conversation with Bruce and Jay. Appreciate them coming. Folks, there's so much to think about and there's so much going on. These are perilous times. I want to return really quickly to another section of the article Common Sense by Tom Trenchard in the American Mind. He says the following. So the stark reality of our political and geographic division sits on top of the similarly stark reality of our intellectual and spiritual division. This might not be a problem for Italy, France, or the United Kingdom, but it is for us. The United States has never been held together by ancestry, national origin, ethnicity, or race. We have always aspired to be a melting pot and a nation whose existential glue is not who you are, but what you believe. A common creed, not demographics, has always defined American identity. He says it way better than I can say it. Who are we? What are we as Americans? What do we stand for? What do we believe? What won't we stand for? That's the real question here. Going forward at ACEK, we are going to put together a list of grievances and a list of principles that we feel should bind us together as one people and one nation. It will be essentially our own Declaration of Independence. And of course, it will borrow. We're not great thinkers here, but we do think we can distill things down to the necessary things that we need to consider. We need you to get involved, to participate, to think, and speak up and stand up for those things that you will not tolerate. Look, we are not for or against a Biden presidency. We are for the ideals as espoused by President Trump during his presidency. But again, who's president is not as important to me, and certainly to ACEK, as the principles and guiding principles upon which this country was founded and should be adhered to, right? The nation is more important than this individual or that individual. Were these elections free and fair? Remains to be seen. Obviously, we're skeptical. I don't know that we're going to be able to depend on anyone or any institution. So going forward, look for our ACEK's Declaration of Independence, both the grievances and principles upon which this country was founded and the objections we have to the way the country is currently being run. We hope you'll stay tuned for that. Friends, I want to thank you for joining us for yet another podcast. Remember, at ACEK, we are committed to American exceptionalism and the individual freedoms and liberties that we enjoy as American. We are a C3. We are not a think tank that looks to affect public policy. We look to educate and mobilize public opinion. Think, get involved. If we can do that, we've done our job. That's the most important thing. If you want a copy of anything we've talked about, you can email me directly, robertc@acekfund, ACEKFUND.org. Tell your friends about us. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter, on Instagram, all those other social media platforms that I know very little about, to be honest. And remember that you get what you give. If you're not willing to participate, if you're not willing to get involved, and we're not even just talking about voting because that's important, but remains to be seen whether or not it's all important. Are we a republic? Are we an aristocracy? Are we something else? I leave you with the following quote. America will never be destroyed from the outside. If we falter and lose our freedoms, it will be because we destroyed ourselves. Abraham Lincoln. No surprise there. Friends, thank you for joining us for our podcast. I'm Robert Chernin. We are ACEK, and we are of the people. Thank you so much for listening.
Stop the